Carl Hopkins.
Here.
Bruce Miller.
Here.
Craig R. Curry. Dolores Johnson.
Here.
Karen Kahn.
Here.
Kirk Martin.
Here.
Jim Wilson.
Here.
Any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Public comment. Well, I'll go ahead and say it anyways, even though I don't see any public here, is that any member of the public may address the Airport Commission on any subject within the jurisdiction that is not scheduled before that day, and the total amount of time is 15 minutes, no individual more than 2 minutes. Notices, Friday, July 10th, the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at the Airport Administration, and that the Air Service Subcommittee met on Wednesday, July 15th, about an hour ago. Minutes, we have a recommendation that the Airport Commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the meeting for Wednesday, June 17th.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Let's see here, consent calendar. We have the property management report on here that the Airport Commission received, the monthly airport property management report. Do I have a motion to approve?
I so
Consent
move.
calendar? Moved.
I move that it be received.
We have a
Second.
motion. We need a second.
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 Moved and seconded, however you wish to record that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Liaison reports. Councilman Frank Hotchkiss, what do you have for us, sir?
Commissioners, thank you for having me here. I think, as you know, we passed City Council a 2-year budget that, although I argued strongly or best I could to respect your wishes about ARF here locally, where I was not successful, but I think that's going to come back. Several of you were there and spoke well. Be prepared to return, if I can put it that way. Another thing that the council has done is chosen to enforce vacation rentals as they are on the books now. I don't know if you followed this, but it's become a very successful business model worldwide, really. The question, including Santa Barbara, and the question was not, was it a good idea, but was it a good idea for Santa Barbara? And basically, the fundamental principle that we made our decision on was that we have on the books a 30-day plus requirement for rentals in order to not commercialize your next door neighbor should he choose to have rentals every other day. In other words, to preserve neighborhoods. And it was a 7-0 decision. I was surprised by the unanimity, but pleased. It actually disappointed a lot of my friends who are making a very good income. And I understand that disappointment, but after all, our responsibility is to preserve the city we have and to do everything we can to keep it as wonderful as it is. So we do, I think, or I think we will come back and consider and maybe even accept what are called home sharing. In other words, if you have a home that at which you have a room that you could rent out, either on a short or long-term basis, you would be allowed to do that. And the reason that I think the council will approve that was the main objection, or one of the big objections, was increase in traffic and lack of control of people who might be vacationing here. But if you're living in your house and they're in part of your house, the concept that I think correct is you're going to be very mindful and watchful to make sure that it does not become egregious in any way. The last thing I wanted to tell you about was regarding the upcoming funding application, do I call it that, from FAA, Hazel? Is that the right way of putting it?
Department of Transportation.
Where community support is requested and a vital part of it. As a realtor, I know that there are several things in the city above and beyond its beauty that are important, one of which is Cottage Hospital, frankly. People are concerned with close by excellent medical health. The other thing that they talk about is how easy is it to get out of here? And that becomes a real interest when some of our major flights to important hubs are canceled. So I bring this up because I would like to go, with your concurrence, to the Board of Realtors, the Association of Realtors, and ask them to give us some financial support on that. It's an opportunity for them to show they can get behind what the city and the airport is doing. And frankly, I've talked to realtors who have a complete misconception of how this works out here. One was ranting and raving about that damned airport commission, and so I kept my mouth shut. You know, that's sometimes hard to do, until after this particular session was over, and I brought him aside. I said, "You don't understand how it works. The reason that we are down in flights," and I walked through the change in aircraft, the cost of other airports and planing, et cetera. And it was one of those pleasant situations where they were totally turned around and almost apologized. Almost, I would say. At least they got the message. So anyway, I'm sorry to take so long. Thank you for listening to my report. Yes, sir.
Quick question, can you enlighten us if there would be any financial impact to the city on this home share
Rent,
and that sort of thing, as far as bed tax or anything of that sort?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, there will be actually a net loss initially. We get almost $1 million. Let me backtrack a little bit. It's interesting when people talk about politicians, they always think in dollars and cents, and this is one decision that went against that premise. Yes, we will have a net loss of $750,000 or $1 million to the general fund from TOT. But some of that will be made up, I think, by, I hope, a new market which we're opening up, which I expect will open up, which is this home sharing thing. What else can I say about that?
Will they be regulated or inspected at all? Or
Yes, they'd have to be licensed.
Okay,
as it
there you
were.
go.
So you get a professional license, but I don't want to look at it, I don't think the city would look at it in terms of, well, how do we make up for the money we're losing? Because
Right.
that wouldn't be the right way to go about it. So again, maybe that reinforces what I said about it being actually a principled decision. Well, I was going to tell you one other thing about that. No, I think that's it. It'll come back before the council, first for the ordinance committee, in maybe a month or so to nail down the specifics. But the train has left the station, the water's over the dam, and I think we definitely made the right decision. I hope you agree. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your suggestion of going to the Board of Realtors for financing. Our subcommittee was meeting about an hour ago to discuss this, and it is an excellent program with lots of verbal support, and hopefully we can get some financial support to back that up.
Right. One reason I love this is that, so often you are approached by associations, boards, et cetera, with telling you how you ought to do your job. And now we have an opportunity to let them share in that burden, if I can put it that way.
And if you
Yes.
need any assistance, let us know. We'd be happy to come down and give
Thank you,
more
Commissioner
facts than they.
Let's see, we got a number of bridges to cross with them, but this could be one of them.
And thanks for your defense, too, by the way.
Sorry?
Thank you for defending that damn airport commission.
Oh, yeah, that was just misinformation, misunderstanding. Thank you.
And next, we have from Goleta, Councilman Michael T. Bennett. You have anything to tell us, sir?
Actually, I do. We just started construction beginning last Wednesday on the widening of Stork Road between Hollister and the freeway. And we're committed to keeping 2 lanes open at all times. And we know that's sometime used by some folks as an alternative, since Fairview's closed, to get to the airport. So we just want to make sure you understand that. We're working 2 shifts from 8 o'clock in the morning until midnight, so that we're going to get this thing cranked out in about, I hesitate to say it, about 6 weeks. That's what we're saying, that we're going to, by working the double shifts, we'll get it done much quicker than we would have otherwise. And that was a decision that was made just a few weeks ago, that we would push for that, and everybody's in agreement. So this project should be complete and put smiles on everyone's faces shortly, especially before UCSB starts, and that's kind of the goal. So, any questions on that? That's our major latest project that we're doing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Administrative reports.
Yes.
We have the license and lease agreement with D&G Ling LLC,
That's correct.
which I'll just start off, having read it, to say congratulations to everybody involved, and let's
Fingers crossed.
keep our fingers crossed. It sounds like a extremely great idea. So I'll let you make the presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is a development proposal that was presented to the airport unsolicited on behalf of Dennis Lynn of New Century Automotive Group. He's in Southern California. But they were looking to, he has another dealership, I believe, over in Hitchcock area, and was looking for a location for Chrysler Dodge, which, as you recall, was at the airport for a number of years. So they approached the airport to discuss the same location for that facility. Mr. Lynn either owns or is partner in 14 other dealerships throughout Southern California. In your packet, there's more information on his background. They did submit financials as well that we reviewed, and he certainly has resources to make this proposal. And Chrysler Jeep is the one that he's proposing initially here at the airport. The location, you'll recall back in 1997 when we did our specific plan for the commercial industrial property at the airport, we had the previous dealership, which is outlined in the red there on that corner of La Patera and Hollister. And the specific plan said, because that was in the approach zone, and now it's called the runway protection zone, that once that lease expired, those facilities should be demolished. And so the airport did that once the leases expired and there was no longer any activity. That land is a runway protection zone and has to be protected. The balance of the land, however, suited their purposes, and that's what we negotiated.
Could you back up a moment? What is the red over there by David Love Place, that building?
That's the state crime lab.
Okay.
Right. So as I mentioned, it was in the runway protection zone, and the runway protection zone, as you know, is to be clear of all obstacles, and it's to be it's because of safety of people on the ground and people in the air. And so FAA in 2012 came out with even more stringent requirements of keeping the RPZ clear. And so that's what we will do in this particular case. The specific plan, as I mentioned, finds this type of development consistent with that document. It is a permissible use under our existing zoning. There's no zoning changes needed. And because the environmental, or the specific plan went through complete environmental, we did the NEPA as well as the CEQA documents, only if there's impacts, which there will be, there's always some additional impacts, or to review new impacts, but they would be able to use the existing documents that we have for their development and for their planning and permitting review process. So we negotiated actually 3 different documents. The first is a license agreement. This provides a term of 3 years for them to do their design, permitting, and construction of the facility, the new facility. We are only charging $1,000 a month for the use of the land. Right now, we don't have any other proposals for it, so they're going to tie it up, so they're going to pay just $1,000 a month. But it could be extended for 1 year, but they're really gung-ho, and based on the circumstances and the fact that it's not in the coastal zone, their permitting process should be easier to do. As easy as anything in Santa Barbara. Dealership lease, once they complete and we have the certificate of occupancy on the facility, then we would enter into a 20-year term lease with 2 5-year options. We had the property appraised in 2015, a monthly rental of $20,000 for that balance of the land there on Hollister, with market adjustments every 5 years, which is in compliance with FAA regulations. And of course, the new rent should never be less than the prior rent. But they also needed extra storage. Since we couldn't use the RPZ area, we had to look for another location. This is the current Lot 2, and at this point, it's not being used by us for parking because of our employments are so far down. So we negotiated a 5-year term only, and they understand it's short term, but a monthly rental of $7,000 a month, and it has annual CPI adjustments.
Excuse me, that's the old drive-in theater area.
Lot 2.
Yeah, that was the
Our-
long-term.
What is that to the left of?
That's extra parking that's still there.
Okay,
Yeah,
Will that be fenced, so their cars would be separated from,
yes,
okay, good.
yes.
Now,
There'll be
isn't-
boundaries for their
Mhm.
space, yes.
that in the flood something or other?
Yes, it is.
And they know that?
They know
Um,
that.
and that
Full
starts-
disclosure.
And that starts when the second lease starts?
It starts once they've completed construction.
Right,
Right.
thank you.
Uh-huh. So the total amount of rental on a monthly basis between the Hollister site and the vehicle storage area would be $27,000 or $324,000 per year for the airport. There is a broker involved, and we agreed to pay half of the brokerage fees for this lease, but that's only for the lease, the 20-year lease with the options. It does not cover the license, nor does it cover the vehicle storage area. So tonight, we're asking for your concurrence and recommendation to City Council to approve the license agreement with the 167,000 square feet of land for a monthly rental of $1,000. And then the second agreement, the actual lease agreement, once the license and the development is completed for 20 years, 2 5s at $20,000 a month. And then the 5-year lease for the 2.9 acres in Lot 2 for storage at $7,000 a month.
So that, if I understand, that first 3, possibly 4 years is at $1,000 a month is when they would do the design, get the permits, and build the building.
That's correct.
And when the building is ready, whether that be in 1, 2, 3, or worst case 4 years, is when the second and third leases take effect.
That's exactly correct, yes.
And the building reverts to whom at the end of the lease if they choose not to renew? Does it revert to us?
Reverts to the city, yes. Mhm.
Just for devil's advocate, if we were to approach and solicit bids for the use of the property, how long would it take on average to occupy the property? What I'm trying to say is we have an unsolicited bid here. We're recommending or we're deciding what to do with this. And if I were the public, I might want to say, well,
I didn't have a chance to do it.
if someone else wanted to come in, what would the timeline be? Would it be similar to this, or would it be much longer to develop that process?
Would we
i.e.
have,
the revenue stream would start on this and is at market value and these kinds of things. But the offhand is that the property could sit empty for a number of years and not produce anything.
correct, that property has been vacant since I've been at the airport, with the exception of the State Crime Lab, which we did in the early 90s, as well as the old dealership.
And there was a loss of rent on that when they went.
When the dealership closed, then we lost rent. And that was a ground lease initially. And then once that ground lease expired, then the facility came back to the airport, and we worked with the current auto dealer for a period of time that was unsuccessful. And once he vacated, that's when the structures came down. We have since 1997, in the big parcel of the airport at 6100 Hollister, as you well know, we've gone out at least 3 times for RFPs. And because the limitation of the city's charter on the term of a lease cannot exceed 50 years, each of those massive proposals failed.
Mhm.
this one, for 20 years plus 5 is really, they were comfortable with that. And we haven't been approached by anybody to build on the airport in that location. I'm looking at Rebecca, yeah, and no one. So I could do that. I could go out and do an RFP, but I'm not sure that it would produce any better results.
I actually was not suggesting that. I was trying to make it more transparent. The fact that we have read this and we understand this, the public may not, and the greater viewing public.
I see.
And so I like to make it very abundantly clear that what has gone into this, what the demographics are of what we had, what we lost, and what the possibilities were
Okay.
opposed to this.
Okay, good.
So,
good.
thank you.
Thank you. And I might point out, too, that by losing the area where the RPZ is for this parcel, I thought that would be a stumbling block. I really did, because that's really the key corner. La Patera and Hollister is the real key
Moved it
corner.
over, though.
And now, but they were still very positive. And with their architect and their team, they feel that they can put the dealership with the maintenance facility there and make it work. So this is a proposal, and until they get their building permit, it's still all up in the air, so to speak.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No,
That parcel has been vacant since the demolition for how long now?
I believe, Rebecca, what do you think, 2008?
Well, that particular portion of parcel 2B and 3 has been vacant since I came to the airport.
Well, it's
That
never
was
had
not
anything
part
on
of
it.
the original dealership.
And when I first came in 1987, that whole area was vacant with the exception of the dealership.
Any other questions? Well, the recommendation is to approve, to the city council to approve these 3 leases. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much and congratulations. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Absolutely.
Should make a significant difference in the budget, I would think, here in a few years.
Years down the road.
Price of a farm, and
Next is, subject is the fiscal 2015 year-end review, and the recommendation is that we receive the report. Please.
I'm making a big note here. This is preliminary. As you all know, the city closes its book on June 30th, but they really don't close until August and September. So there will be other adjustments, but I wanted to give you a snapshot of where we are, because there was so much discussion during this year, as you know, regarding our budget and our finances. Some of our key indicators this year, once again, our passenger count is down 10% over 2014, but it's not 13% as it was the year before. So I'm feeling good about that it's slowing down. GA activity, we've had increases in landing fees as well as fuel flowage fees, which is positive for the airport. Rental car revenue, it's over the top. And I think that's because we're getting cars rented not just from travelers, but from locals. If you want a car, then you come to the airport, which is good for us. Our terminal concessions are doing well, and they have not spiked prices. So it's just people coming and knowing that they're there and actually purchasing, which is good. Our commercial industrial, the dollar vacancy rate on June 30 was about 5.8%. And Rebecca's working daily to lease every bit of the property. So our operating revenues, what you have each one of the lines of business, the actual for 14, the revised for 15, and then our actual, and then our variance. Commercial industrial property is still down 7.4%, primarily because of the restaurant, and Big Brand came along late. And then we also had another major tenant, Freedom Photonics, who had 2 buildings when they left. And that's one of those good stories about airport property. They started with a small amount of space, added to a second building, and then they graduated and left the airport for other locations within Goleta, I believe. So we're happy to share that with our neighbors. Non-commercial aviation, as we said, that's the landing fees and the FBOs, ampersand. Commercial aviation is up primarily, that 5.1%, because of boarding bridge fees. The airlines switched out the Embraers and put in the regional jets. They're using the boarding bridges more frequently. And at the rate we had last year, that's a significant amount of money. Terminal concessions, as I said earlier, are up, which is very positive. Interest, we do not have the most recent or the last year, the last month of the year's appropriation yet, but it's pretty insignificant, as you can tell. If we're lucky, we'll get up to $121,000 in interest. Other income, as Tom has noted here, we had two sort of unexpected revenues come in this year. One was a refund from the Goleta Water District. They changed their billing system, and I think other folks had the same situation, perhaps where you overpaid and then they gave you money back once they found the error, and that happened to us at $109,000. Also, Emma Construction. Emma was a contractor for the airline terminal, and there was a contractual issue that sort of took a while to resolve. And as a result of that, then half of the final retention was split between Emma and the airport. So we received $43,000 back from retention on that. So that was unexpected as well. So overall, revenue is up almost 1%, 0.7%, but notice it's just barely above 2014. So we're really hanging in there. Vacant properties leased, as I mentioned, we will see, I believe, next year, as well as the development on the north side, the anticipated development with direct relief, get going. Our yard uses some of those buildings, and even right now, Building 115, because we can't do long-term leases. We've moved tenants out, and we're using it for short-term rental. So there will be an impact on our revenues, and if we lose all of those folks, that's about $275,000 a year. GA increased landing and fuel flowage fees, those track with our rates with the airlines. We anticipate rental cars to continue doing good business. Greater boarding bridge use, even this year, we've relocated. United will now be, well, shortly, be using Gate 2 as well as Gate 4 and 5, which is good, using that boarding bridge really well. And then we relocated Alaska from Gate 2 down to Gate 5 because they elect to ground board. That's their company policy. So, but allowing their passengers to go down an escalator as opposed to outside steps, which were not safe. So that's good. And as I mentioned, the one-time refunds that we received. Passenger count is down 10%. Keep your fingers crossed. Operations are also down. That looks like a big spread, but if you notice, it's 104, 105, 106. And we've been averaging not that many operations for a number of years. It's a little over 104,000 this year. Fuel sales, though, for jet fuel, that's going up. And I think as our FBO partners have indicated, the aircraft are heavier, maybe not as many flights, but the size of the aircraft is larger. So they're using more jet fuel, which is good for them and as well as the airport. Salaries and benefits. Here we go for our expenditure side. As you know, we've had vacancies. We continue to have vacancies. Maintenance and other under supplies and services. Right now, it's looking like Tom mentioned there's $435,000 that are in encumbrances And we don't know exactly, we're still paying bills, so when those go out, we anticipate some of that money dropping back to the bottom line. Long-term Lot 2, the shuttle was not used during the holidays, so we saved about $48,000 there. But at the end of the year, we know that there's going to be other adjustments downtown, so we're estimating at least $150,000 in adjustments.
Those 150, in which direction would those adjustments be?
Those would be negative.
Expense, okay.
Down. This one, because we've had discussion before about actuals versus budget, I wanted Tom, and he did give you our actual expenditures for 2014, our budget for 15, and then our actuals for 15, and then the variances for both. So compared to the budget, our salaries are down 8%, but year over year, we're up 4%. So the other big one, the 92, that's special projects. That's when we eliminated the shuttle operation. That was a big savings for the airport. Equipment, we didn't spend all of that, but we did spend more in 15 than we did in 14. And of course, bond debts there. Capital transfers in 14, we actually funded some capital projects, and we didn't do that this year. So that's why that 764 includes transfers out for capital. So expenditures right now are 6% below budget and 4.6% below 2014, which is significant, I think. So year-end revenues exceed expenditures by about $740,000. We do know there'll be adjustments, but in 2016, keep in mind, in our budget, we are using $1.2 million of our policy reserves. Any questions?
I have two questions. On general aviation, it said in there that there was more landings, and yet you said later that there's not as many landings, but they're heavy aircraft, so.
As far as, I don't have the specific
Yeah.
numbers on the number of landings.
Yeah, it said an increase in landings, and yet,
Landing or landing fees?
that's what I wanted to see. I was
Landing
pulling it up.
fees.
Landing
Probably the
fees.
heavier the aircraft.
Right, you charge more. And what is the flowage fee now?
Fuel flowage fee is still 5 cents for GA and 8 cents for jet fuel, and 4 cents for airlines.
Okay,
Airline
thank you.
fuel. Uh-huh.
Other questions? I had two. The vacancies that you've mentioned that we continue to have, are those vacancies there because you can't hire, you can't find the right people, or are they there because you need to have the salary savings?
We were almost fully staffed for a short period of time. Patrol was fully staffed through the, quit grinning, through the, like March, May. And since that time, we've had 2 vacancies in patrol happen. So patrol now has 2 vacant positions. The old assistant director's position continues to be vacant, and that's been since December 2013. We had a retirement up front and filled it, and then another vacancy. So, I mean, it's just shifting around. So it's not that we do the budget with the intent to have salary savings. It just seems to occur.
And that's 2 patrol out of how many total?
9, 10. 9 officers with 1 supervisor.
And 2 of those 9 are missing?
Missing.
Vacant?
Patrols
Vacant.
are looking for them.
We're starting a recruitment now, and in December, we're anticipating another one of our senior officers, I guess he's a sergeant, will retire. So it just happens.
Okay, I have another question concerning GA. You said that the GA revenue was up. Is that the landing fees that has caused that overall GA revenue to go up?
it's a combination of all the fees that we receive. The FBOs have agreements with us that call for an annual adjustment in rent, so that's part of it.
Oh, okay.
Landing fees are up because I believe if it's not frequency, it's the weight of the aircraft. And then fuel flowage fees, because we did increase those from 5 cents to 8 cents,
Okay.
and that does make a difference.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I would like to comment on the bottom line. If we take the 739,000 of excess revenues over expenditures, reduce that by the 150,000 for final adjustments, that leaves us with an excess of revenue over expenditures of 3.8%. General Motors would be happy with that. But further, if you look at the budgeted numbers, we were anticipating a deficit of more than 2%.
Correct.
So the combination is that we did 5.8% better than what we had anticipated at the beginning of the year. And I think that's commendable.
Thank you. Staff paid attention, and really every dollar that's spent is analyzed, and we do our very best to take care of all of our assets to the extent needed. But we are pretty conservative when it comes to spending money. And we know we need to be if we're going to have a capital program.
Yeah,
So thank you.
We're fiscally very sound. Next year is scary.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments? I think there's no action required on that. We
Just
received
receive
it. Next is recommendation that the Airport Commission receive a presentation on the Department of Transportation Small Community Air Service Development Program and authorize the Commission Chair to sign a letter of support.
On behalf of the airport, thank you. This is a new adventure for the airport. We're very concerned about the reduction in airline service that Santa Barbara's had since, well, in the last 10 years, it's gone down. And it's something that's not because Santa Barbara doesn't have a market, but rather because of mergers with the airlines, fleet transitions, and then pilot, not necessarily shortage, but salaries, or both. But the impact, as you can see, in 2008, we had 45 daily departures, and today we have 22. We had 7 airlines then, and there are now 3. And we had 12 nonstops, and now we have 6. So we have been impacted by the industry's changes. This chart just gives you, we used this during our budget presentation and sort of stopped in 2014, but you now have 2015 enplanements. So you'll see that chart continues to go down, and our goal is to make it come back up one way or the other. So it's a 27% decline since 2005, 10 years. So one of the options presented to airports, small hub airports and non-hub airports, is a program through the Department of Transportation. And it's a grant to assist communities with air service by actually providing grant funding along with community support to provide an airline with revenue guarantee. And it also provides for marketing that flight or that route to the community so that you can make sure that it's successful. Priority selection criteria, the grant application has several key factors. Santa Barbara meets all of them, but in particular are high airfares. Santa Barbara's known in the industry for having high airfares, but community participation is key to having the grant successfully approved, and we need to demonstrate that it benefits a broad segment of the public. Some of the communities that received grants last year, there were 52 submittals to Department of Transportation. 14 were awarded. So to submit does not mean that we get the grant. Redding, California was the one here in California this past year to receive a grant. Boise, Idaho, this is their second grant, but most of them are going for $750 or greater. There's only $5.5 million available to allocate to the grants, the grant awards this year, which is a small amount of money. So our application that we're working on now is to ask for $750,000. We've been working with the community, Visit Santa Barbara, the chambers, Goleta. Kristen Miller's been very, very active and supportive. Santa Barbara Chamber and also the Carpinteria Chamber and others to help us try to generate $250,000 in cash for marketing and the revenue guarantee. The airport's existing incentive program, airline incentive program that we've had for 10, 12 years probably, allows the airport to waive landing fees up to 12 months and also to spend up to $50,000 in marketing locally. And we would provide, in this particular case, based on an Embraer 175 landed weight, we anticipate landing fees to be about $100,000. But those two do not count as cash. They're counted as in kind. So the 250 is what we're looking for. Our target for an airline to serve Santa Barbara, we need a mid-continent hub to go eastbound. We're looking at United to discuss Chicago or Houston, or American to go to Dallas-Fort Worth. Each of those hubs add 70 new one-stop destinations that are not currently served here. And a lot of folks have the conception that if you just go to LA, you can go anywhere. And you can, but you can't necessarily do it direct, or you can't do it with one stop. So by going to Dallas, there are 70 new locations that you can go, just get on the plane once you stop in Dallas and go forward. So this approach, by going with these airlines, meets our grant criteria. I might also point out that the Air Service consultant and I have met with United to discuss Chicago and Houston, presented a route analysis based on our leakage study and our market in Santa Barbara. And United has also done their own study and know that these routes work. American, the same thing. They know Dallas works. We demonstrated it with our data, and their own internal data say that these routes work. So I have confidence that should we be awarded the grant and we are successful in any of these destinations, Santa Barbara has the market to fill the plane to keep us without using the money. Because if you don't use it, nobody spends anything. But what it would do, I think, by having the grant, would put us up on the priority sheet for those airlines, just because then there is no risk to them. The community's taking the risk. We have a short time frame. It was 4 weeks from the time that the notice went out until the grant is due, which is next Wednesday. And we will learn between now and September 30th if we're awarded a grant. And then the grant is good for 3 years, as I said. The community pledges are not collected unless the grant is awarded. But once it is awarded, then the community funds would need to be put in the bank along with the grant money, so that should we need to cover any loss for the airline, it's an even-steven allocation. So tonight, as Commissioner Chair mentioned, we want a letter from the Airport Commission, who certainly you all recognize the issues and the problems that we've gone through, to just sign a letter of support for the airport department to submit this grant application. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Question on the community match. Is there a particular dollar requirement there? And is it required that commitment be kind of in place before the application is submitted?
The pledge forms that we developed have a variety of dollar amounts on them. Visit Santa Barbara has allocated $75,000 for the grant application. So we're looking for donations to equal the $250,000. So it could be as little as $5,000. It could be as much as $150,000. Your other question? I'm
And
sorry.
so is it necessary for that to be secured before the grant application
The
next week?
pledges have to be there because in the financial documentation that you submit, you identify what your budget is, your grant amount, your cash contributions, and your in-kind. So even though we don't have to have dollars in hand, we have to have the pledge in hand, yes.
So you currently have, it sounded like 75K
5,000
of
so
the
far.
needed 250
Right,
that you would need kind of pledged by next week.
yes.
And can the airport contribute in that in-kind, or is that required to be community in-kind?
Needs to be community. The city could, should they have funds available, which they don't, but should the city have funds available, that could go in the state, if you had a matching grant from the state, that could be also counted as cash. But we have been working, as I mentioned, with the chambers, and I know that they're reaching out to their business partners to discuss the grant and the potential air service destinations and seeking participation from those businesses. And we will be following up as well. In our subcommittee this afternoon, there were so many ideas thrown out that Tom Bullers and Tracy and I will be following up on all of those suggestions.
So those need to be in place before next Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Plenty.
There's no pressure here whatsoever.
And I noticed you said Des Moines was awarded twice.
Boise,
Boise,
Idaho.
excuse me. I knew it was out there somewhere. Will we apply for this again?
Yes, if we are not successful, we certainly would apply again. Currently, because Congress has not completed their budget allocations, so their AIP doesn't have a budget yet, FAA doesn't have a budget, and Department of Transportation doesn't have a budget for this. But I anticipate that they would. So certainly if we are not successful this year, we will do it again next year.
And if we were successful this year, why would we not do it again?
They don't allow you to have two grants working at one time. So the grant is good for 3 years. So
I see.
you get it, and then you have 3 years to use it, or
And
it goes back.
If you use it sooner, can you, like, say you use it in a year or two, then can you apply again?
I think after 3 years,
You have to wait the full term?
right.
Okay.
Yes. That's what Boise did. I think their first grant was in 2011, and they got
That's
2014.
That's where I was going with that, but I didn't realize there was a lag time in there.
Yeah, the 3 years.
So aside from a lot of work for you all, is there any reason why the airport would not want to do this?
In the past, when we lost service to San Jose, and we met with the local IT businesses and indicated that revenue guarantee was an option and something that airlines actually considered, there was not any interest at that point in doing it. But I think nationwide, with all the airports experiencing the same level of reduction, especially medium, small, and non-hub airports being severely hit, I think communities are looking at all options to improve the service to the region. And certainly it's not just it's not just Santa Barbara. I mean, we really do serve more than just this city. We serve the region. So,
Any other questions? Well, I'd like to comment that I think it's a lot of work, but with a tremendous amount of potential, and so we'll all keep our fingers crossed that the community can get at least enough pledges to make it worthwhile. We have a request to,
I'd make a motion to authorize the commission chair to sign a letter of support.
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We go on to the director's report.
thank you very much. On the director's report, as we indicated earlier about the loss of airline service, and you have before you the monthly report that we normally distribute, I did want to let you know that if you look at the 3 airlines that we have, and you look at their, you don't have this in front of you, unfortunately. But if you look at U.S. Airways / American and United and Alaska, they are up this year over last year by like 5.6%. So the airlines we have and the seats that we have, we are gaining employments. Last year at this time, we had 51,000, and this year we have 54,000 with those 3 airlines. So that's really, I see a trend, hopefully will continue.
Hazel, has the Alaska reinstatement of the Portland flight, is it projected to continue, or are they thinking it'll be seasonal?
You're thinking the second flight to Seattle is what you're thinking.
Okay.
And they, our air service consultant and I will be going up to Seattle probably in September to visit with them. But the report that we had in our certification meeting, what'd she say, 96% occupancy?
They're very pleased with the performance.
Very pleased. And the schedule of that flight also made a huge difference. But she's just overwhelmed with all of the service. It's really doing very, very well.
It's been good for the concessions as well.
So Portland will continue other than just being summer?
Right. We've had Portland continuously now for a couple of years.
Good.
Yeah, Portland's good, and Seattle 2 flights, yes. Okay. The other item I wanted to bring your attention to in the director's report deals with, under the financial summary, which would be item D on page 2 of 4, you'll notice that the gross revenue per employment for each of the categories is up this year over last year. And that's really good to see. And then the last item is something new for you all, and Airport Patrol is here 24/7, and they do an excellent job, but we really don't pay attention to, or you don't really see them because they're there on the curb or they're responding to the TSA. So I asked Fernando, the supervisor, patrol supervisor, to develop a report that shows the activity that they do, the responses, the call-outs, the times, and I just thought it would be good information for you to have. And it talks about aircraft incidents and aircraft accidents and response times. So I wanted you to have that because I think it's really important what they do, and we should highlight it some. So with that, I'll answer any other questions you might have.
Questions? Comments?
Just did want to comment. Yes, thank you for adding the safety and protection report. I was a little curious, 62 emergency calls to date this year. And those are calls that went directly to your dispatch center as opposed to out to 911 and then back in? Is that?
Tracy?
Typically, that is correct, where we get a call. Some of them may have been received via 911, but the vast majority will be through the SSC.
So your staff for those types of emergency calls are the first responders?
Yes.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any others? We stand adjourned.
Thank you.